exposing the truth. Welcome to Coffee Time Again, exposing the truth. Dale at the microphone, the show that demonstrates how history repeats itself. He digs into the past, shows what happens, and how it is happening now. Follow the path of history to where it goes, then relate it to today to reveal the connections. The culture that forgets its history has no future. A history buff and loves to talk about it, going back as far as ancient Greeks and Egyptians and beyond. So grab your coffee, your chair, and listen to the show. Hope you enjoy.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever the time zone is you're in. My name is Dale, and I am the host of Coffee Time Again, exposing the truth. Today, we're going to expose the truth with Julia Strukely. Sorry about that. Anyway, we'll be exposing the truth with her today, and she is a teacher, which I've had many teachers on before, and I'm having more because I got 12 grandkids all in school except for two. So I'm very, very cautious about schooling and what's going on in schools. And she is also a practicing Catholic, which really adds to the wonders of this because I am also a very devout Episcopalian. So we got both best worlds here. So let me introduce Julia to you. Welcome to the show, Julia.
Thank you, Dale. It's good to be here.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I was born and raised outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I went to Catholic University, though, for my undergraduate and master's degrees in Washington, D.C. And then I stayed in the Virginia area outside of D.C. for a while and started teaching. And now I am in Richmond, Virginia, just about an hour and a half south of DC, and I continue to teach in Catholic schools. I've been a middle school and high school Catholic school teacher for about 14 years now.
Middle school. Ooh, the rough ones.
I like them. I taught high school first. I taught high school for 5 years up outside of DC. And then I've been at this school in Richmond for about 9 years. And I was nervous at first too, but they're wonderful kids.
And I'm sure the Catholic people who put the kids in Catholic school are not usually the bad actors, has been my experience, except for the one that Catholic school I started out in. I made it to second grade, and then the nun came by and whacked me with a ruler. I kicked her in the shin, which was no big deal, except I had steel-toed boots on.
Yeah, we don't have the nuns with rulers anymore.
Well, they didn't have me in that school anymore either. Welcome anyway. So you're from my son lives in Alexandria.
Outside of Richmond?
Alexandria.
Oh, Alexandria, is that what you said?
Yeah. That's where my son lives, yeah.
Yeah, I actually taught up in Alexandria. That's the school I was at the high school was in Alexandria, Virginia before I moved down here.
Don't think he'd put his kids in school in a Catholic school, knowing my son would not do that. Anyway, what do you love about teaching?
I do honestly love our students. And I do love the sixth graders, especially. They're about 11 and 12 and they're still kids. And I love that because when I taught high school, some of them were already kind of jaded by the world and jaded by the things that they'd experienced. But I feel like middle schoolers still even though they're going through hormone changes, they still want to learn and they want to please you and they want to do what's right and they're still learning. And so they're eager to learn, a lot of my students. And so I love that their willingness and their openness in many ways.
Okay, I can see that. I don't work well with children. I was a drug and alcohol counselor, but I don't work with children, except for my 12 grandkids. So I
12
got
is a lot.
That's a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're practicing Catholic, which is commendable.
Thank you.
What is the background of your faith? Were you born into the Catholic Church or you converted or what?
That's a good question. I was born and raised Catholic, baptized Catholic when I was a baby. My family that is from Ohio are immigrants. My mom is first generation. Her parents were from Poland, and so Eastern Europe, very Catholic. Poland, I remember growing up. Pope John Paul II was Pope, and my grandmother had a big picture of him in the kitchen because he was the Polish Pope, and he was the Pope that I had for most of my life. And so it was very much a part of my life and my upbringing. My parents put me in Catholic school from kindergarten through high school, and then I went on to Catholic university. So I've been very involved in my faith and in Catholic schools my whole life.
That is absolutely commendable because people of faith seem to be happier. And, overall, I've noticed with the congregation I'm involved with, the ones that are really into it are really happier than the ones that I see out here in the world who
Mm-hmm.
don't have any faith and so like I say,
Mm-hmm. I
you
do
got
find in moments of like, in times where we have a loss, like a death in the family, those rituals are very helpful and very consoling. I off, just in those moments, what to do, prayer and the liturgy, the ritual that I have as Catholics, has been helpful for me.
well, Episcopalians have been called Catholic, right? So
Yeah,
I'm
similar.
familiar with yours because they're very similar. Mine are very similar. If you came into an Episcopal church, you'd be comfortable because the liturgy is pretty much the same. And what I'm
Hmm.
doing, I've got a list of your questions you put on the
Hmm.
podcast.
Sure. Yeah. And any questions you have for me are fine. I'm pretty
See,
much an open book.
yeah, so am I. And I think that's good. I seen one question on here that's got me kind of confused though. What has karaoke got to do with Catholic and teaching?
Oh, it's just some people want to know like your fun facts or like other things that you like to do in your spare time. And so I do love pop music. I'm a musician, and
Oh,
music runs in my family. So I like to sing in my spare time and for fun, like to go with friends to karaoke as a hobby or something I like to do for fun.
okay. I was a bit wondering about that one.
Sometimes podcasts they want to get to know you or whatever, and they just kind of ask what your favorite things, pastimes are.
Yeah, so karaoke is one of your favorite pastimes.
Okay, it is. Music is a big part of my life too. I
Okay,
play the piano. I'm a singer. I play actually for mass on the weekends.
okay.
I play for mass at the church. So yeah, so music is a big hobby and interest as well.
I was in one church that I did the sound system and the video and the rest of the sound and videos and stuff that we did in the church and a lot of stills. And I found I couldn't concentrate on the service as well as I could on what I was trying to accomplish. Do you have the same problem?
It's I find that yeah, sometimes I'm focused more on the music than I am what's going on in the liturgy, but sometimes it's nice to participate. It's a way for me to use my gifts, I think, to serve God. So I like to have a balance. I like to have some, weekends where I'm playing, and then maybe some weekends where I can just be in the pews and pray and not have to be in charge.
Yeah, that's where I finally ended up. I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to get out of here so I can pay attention to what's going on. Because I was going through a
Totally.
difficult time anyway, and I was having problems.
No, I totally agree. I think that is a challenge. I think in ministry, I've been in ministry for my whole life. I teach in a classroom, but I was in youth ministry for a while, right out of college. And
Mhm.
and even I consider teaching a ministry too. And it's hard
It
sometimes to
is.
kind of separate what's for my students in my ministry and then what's for me and my relationship with God.
Yeah, it can be difficult, especially being in a Catholic church where you've got things you have to do. I went to a private school, non-denominational, when I was in seventh and eighth grade. Uh, and it was difficult because that's where I found my faith was in that school. But I was
Mm,
baptized Methodist and I became Episcopalian in 2015. Uh, no, it wasn't either 2015, it's 2010, I think it was. Somewhere along in here anyway. It's been so long I can't remember. I was going to ask you, when
I don't
you
know. We've been
played,
talking about everything: school, karaoke,
yeah,
Catholicism.
I was going to ask you
It's
about that. I'm an old man,
okay.
my mind goes sometime. I excuse
I
sorry
I
about
teach
that.
um I teach theology for middle school and high school. My master's degree is in theology, but my so I teach a scripture course.
Okay,
And then I have my bachelor's is in media studies. So some of the questions you might have on there are about media literacy, which
yeah,
is something I studied and something that I teach my students too, like how to use the media safely and how to discern between um, like the purpose of information, like websites that like to try to figure out what the intent of an app or a website is,
Mhm.
and to discern like fake news from real news and straight news and persuasive news. So that's another thing that's I'm a specialty or interested
How
in.
do you discern between fake news and real news? Because I'm having trouble with it because
It's hard, I know, especially because anybody can create media now. I think when
Mhm.
I was growing up, we just trusted the broadcasters and the newspapers because they had to be vetted to do what they do and produce the media they produce. But now no one has to be vetted. You can go online and create anything.
Right,
So some of the clues are what I tell my students is to like look at the headlines, and if the headline is using any kind of like descriptive language or is trying to make you feel a certain type of way, if it's um, you have to kind of question what is the intent of the article, right? Or what's the intent of the headline? Is it trying to inform me, or is it trying to persuade me? Is it trying to make me think one side of an issue or not? So we're looking to try to find like just straight information, and it's hard to find these
it is.
days.
Well, being a historian, I know that all of the news show, uh, radios, TV, newspapers, are all owned by six different corporations. That's it.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
very
And so
difficult to find good
yeah, it's a
open.
business, and for people, so
It
sometimes
is.
people don't have like a interest in real news. They're going to promote the news that their investor wants them to
Right,
promote. So that is
right.
an issue for sure.
So that's how the reason I was asking that question about how do you discern between the difference between a real
Hmm.
news and a fake news, and
And it's
because
a lot of work, and people don't want to do the work. I don't want to do the work. I want to just like scroll and learn, and I just want to be told. But it gets harder and harder because a lot of my students use apps, and on apps, when you like something, then the app starts taking track of like what you like, so it's just going to start feeding you things that
right.
you like, and that's called an echo chamber. And so then
Mhm.
you're only getting news back that is the stuff that you want to hear, and then you're
Right.
never hearing the other side of an issue.
Well, you can't make any decision on anything unless you know both sides of the story. And so many of
I agree.
the in the
Yeah,
media today, they're not giving you both sides of the.
I
I'm old
agree.
enough to remember Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley and that bunch. So at
Yeah.
one point, Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America.
Right. And our journalists aren't necessarily the most trusted people
So
anymore.
who's
Yeah.
I don't know who's least trusted, Congress or the journalist.
I
But
know. I
that's a
agree.
close
I
second.
agree. So my students, I teach them to look for bias as well. So again, that idea of like, what is the purpose of this article? Is it trying to persuade me? We also watch, there's like little segments of student news that I find, like there's certain, like CNN does like a 10-minute student news, but there's
Yeah.
other less biased, but because CNN can be biased at times. So we'll watch
Mhm.
it, and we'll look for it. Are they trying to make us feel a certain way by playing, by sharing this piece or by saying certain things about this issue? So we talk about it, but unfortunately, you really do have to like ask a lot of questions, and a lot of people
You
don't
do.
want to do that work.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
I watch my morning news here, and that's for about an hour, so I can get the weather. I don't necessarily pay attention to the news,
Hmm.
you
And I think
know.
we do have to. I get concerned for my students because they are so much information is thrown at them. I don't want them to get overly anxious either at such a young age. So I
Oh,
want them to be informed and know how to discern news, but I don't want them to be anxious. And I think a lot having so much news readily available to us is making us a little bit more paranoid and anxious than we probably need to be. you know?
yeah. With what's going on in education today, how are you affected by some of this woke and CRT stuff? Is that affecting your curriculum any or your personal?
For me, it's not. Again, I teach theology, so our things really haven't changed. Our curriculum hasn't changed much.
Yeah,
Um, but I do with my journalism and my media literacy classes. I'm very careful. Like you were saying earlier, I try to present both sides, and we try to have dialogues, and again to just kind of do straight, unbiased news,
yeah,
because I do want to be very careful not to say anything, and for me, I do have the guidelines of the Catholic Church, which is helpful too. So I'm not going to
yeah,
do anything or say anything that's not approved by the church. So I have that. So yes, to your point, I'm not affected in the same way as like public schools are
yeah.
affected right now.
That's what I
Yeah.
was wondering is how would that
Yeah.
affect because it's affecting my grandchildren, from what I hear from them, that they're getting this stuff and they're scared to death. A couple of my grandkids are just absolutely scared to death. This
I know. And
whole,
we don't want them to be anxious, right? We wanted them to be healthy and happy and
I
whole
want to be kids.
people.
I want
Yeah.
them to
Want
be
to be
kids.
kids. Yeah.
Some
Mm-hmm.
of them, I got one that's only 6 years old, and she's already getting a little anxious. I've noticed with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that's
it,
where, for me, prayer comes in those moments. I am lucky and fortunate that with my students, we can have the
yeah,
times in prayer together because that helps calm some of the anxiety, gives us something to do
the only
with that.
theology and religious teaching they get comes from me, and their parents are not real happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
They get some anyway. I just can't. I'm not able to help myself. I got to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Context
It's
of
good
what's
for them to
going
be
on.
exposed. It's good for them to be exposed, and then hopefully they can choose for themselves, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what I hope is that they will
Mm-hmm.
choose themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
their parents will not have so great,
Mm-hmm.
especially my oldest. It just drives me absolutely crazy. Those grandchildren are a bit older. The oldest one's 22 now, so
Mm-hmm.
she's she's out on her own. So anyway, what are the benefits of the new media?
I really like where my students and I were just talking about this today, like viral videos and social media apps. So just like we were talking about, maybe the bad side is that anybody can create
Mhm.
media these days. I also find it can be positive. Like my students love new media, social media, because they can create and they can respond and they can participate with something. So like TikTok is the big app right now that they love. It's like creating videos and it
Mhm.
can be fun. Like if you, for them, they like to find like dances that other people have created and try to do the dances and um, interact. It's just a way for people to interact when it's done in a healthy way. I think it can be really positive to bring. I mean, you and I are able to talk and meet, and we've never met in person, but because of new media, because of Zoom, because of Podmatch, podcasting, we're able to connect in a way. And so it is a cool way to connect with people of similar interests and to create and to be productive. But it just has to be, I think, like anything in moderation and in a
Yeah.
healthy way.
Are you pretty much controlled by the state or the church controls your curriculum?
The diocese, which is the
Diocese.
church. Yeah. But the
Good.
state also has like the diocese also has to like math curriculum and his like it's this I guess it's a mix of both the state and diocese. What I teach is the diocesan because it's the theology, but
Yeah.
my colleagues who teach math have to go with state standards.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Because I have a little trouble with that, where everybody takes the teaching to the test rather than the teaching to the knowledge.
sure. Yeah, we don't quite have that issue. We do standardized testing just as for progress reports to kind of see if the students are progressing through the year.
Well,
They do
yeah.
performance tests, but we don't have the same like end of the year kind of tests like public schools do.
Yeah, that's good. That is really
Hmm.
good because that
Hmm.
creates more. Now, I'm a big proponent of going back to school like it was when I was in school. We had Bibles in school, in the library. We didn't have them in the classroom, but we had them in the library. We could use them. We had more than the Bible. We had several different uh, holy books from different faiths and religions and stuff in the school I went to. But we also had shop. We had economics. We had typing. We had skills, bookkeeping, and banking and stuff like that. I believe we need to go back to that type of curriculum as well as the core basics. There are some school districts in the South that are teaching history starting in 1860.
Hmm. Yeah, I
American
find that
history.
my students don't have as much of a like I think since I teach the Bible, ancient history and civilizations are really important. And I think, so much of our culture and like our governments and like democracies, goes back to like ancient cultures, some of the ideas and thinking. And I do find my students don't get much of that. They do focus a lot on American history, which is important too. But I do think, for me particularly, some of my interests are those ancient cultures that I
Yeah.
think some of our
Well,
systems are
me
based
too.
on.
Yeah,
Hmm.
some of my podcasts go all the way back to the ancient Greeks
Mm,
because of their philosophy on different things. And they were talking
right.
about climate. They were talking about climate change 2,000 years before Jesus.
Right. So yeah, I'm biased because I do love philosophy and things like that, but I do
Yeah,
think so many of our systems have ideas that are borrowed from those early cultures. So,
they are. Even our language.
hmm.
A language comes from ancient cultures as well.
Yes, I think it's important. And I
Well,
am disappointed that my students don't learn that as early as and as well. The geography is also not emphasized for some
no,
reason. They don't know where anything is when we're talking about
good.
Israel for the Bible. I have to point out everything. And even with Exodus, when we do Egypt, I have to show them like how close it is and all of this. And
Yeah,
I do have to do a history and geography lesson too when I'm doing the Bible for sure.
good for you. Good for
Yeah.
you. Teach them what Russia used to be.
Well, it was interesting today. So in my journalism class, we watched a little clip about like Russia and like I guess some Russians had recently visited North Korea and like their kind of alliance that's forming. And I kind of had to do this whole back thing about the Soviet Union, how like it's had similar, that it was communist for a while. It was like a whole thing and they had no idea, like it was,
No, because they're not taught that, from
yeah. But I mean, I
preschool.
lived through it. I was a child of the 80s, so like I remember when the Soviet Union fell and all of that, but they have no idea what that means,
I'm
the
old enough to remember the
significance of it.
Cold War, most of the Cold War.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's just barely missed remembering World War II. I
Hmm.
uh, really, how can we become more media literate? I know you teach your children to be that way, but how can adults do that?
I know. I think some of the things we were talking about earlier, I think asking questions like when someone shares something with you, try to look for what is the intent or the purpose of this article. Is the purpose to try to make me provoked? Is it trying to make me feel some type of way, or is it just to inform me? To look at like when it was published. I think sometimes people just repost things and it's old information.
Mhm.
To maybe try to look and see if the website is an actual like reputable website. Sometimes people like anyone can create a website nowadays, so making sure it's like an actual credible reputable website, that the author of the document is actually, a journalist and unfortunately all of this requires a lot of research, but I guess just not accepting things at face value and doing a little bit of research before you repost it
Well,
is
I
a
think that's an excellent idea. What do you think of
yeah.
uh, Wikipedia?
So,
That's
Wikipedia is not as bad as people get its credit for, but it is, people should know that anybody can alter it,
right.
so um it used to get a super bad rap. I've learned like another source that used to be really not reputable has built up more as BuzzFeed. So those are still not great, and I would not want my students to use it I wouldn't want them to use in a bibliography, but I don't think it's as bad as it was when it first started.
Yeah,
But I still like go against it. But for a quick little research to like find out information, I think it's fine. But I wouldn't cite it in a document.
yeah,
Yeah.
I use Wikipedia did some of my research on history when I ran
Hmm.
somebody doing a podcast, either one of my own written ones or an interview. I use Wikipedia, not a lot, and I again like you, I just use it for quick little snippets here
Yeah,
and
I think to
there. And,
answer quick questions, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
and I never use
But I
BuzzFeed.
wouldn't put in my footnotes of like my, thesis
No,
or my
no. I
dissertation
have
or
in a couple of
anything.
in my earlier
Yeah.
podcasts, the ones that were only audio. I did use
Hmm.
put it in there because I wanted people to know where I'm getting my information.
And that's good. I mean, that is good. Yeah.
That way they can go look for themselves. But
Yeah,
I
that's
tell
great.
them, don't
That's
take
good.
my word for it. Go look it up. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And I go to the congressional records, look
That's
up
great.
stuff.
Yeah, anything that's like, I tell my students, to like .gov is good. Like looking at the URL, like the address, right? Like if it's a .edu, it's from a university, so that's most likely pretty credible, like it's a university study. .orgs and .coms are a little bit dicey because again, anybody can create a .com, and
Yeah,
some .orgs are trying to persuade you. Some .orgs have a bias or
yeah.
an agenda, so you have to be careful.
You have to be really careful. I
Hmm.
don't use a lot of college research, although I do
Hmm.
some because I can't I have trouble trying to find what I'm looking for. I can't get the search words down
Yeah.
quick enough.
Yeah. I
Once
mean,
in
not all. I mean, they're also great. There's newspapers on
a
.coms, and like, so there are, and .orgs, there's some that are very, very informative. But again, then you have to, if you've got that, then look at like, I also do my students know to verify. So, okay, you see a news story on one site, check another site, see if it's saying similar things, or if it's saying
Yeah,
different things, then you know somebody's not right, you know.
right.
So
And somewhere between the two of them is the truth,
probably, yeah,
in my opinion, anyway.
yeah, yeah, that's fair.
I you got several questions in here on your faith in the Bible.
Hmm.
What are some of the issues with the new media? We discussed several of them that they're not exactly. I have a real problem with TikTok because there's
You do
connection
what?
to
What
the
is your what's your issue with it?
my issue with TikTok is its connection to the Communist Chinese Party.
Okay. Hmm.
That's my biggest problem with it, not the fact that it does create problems. I see it all the time in the newspaper. Oh, I don't get the newspaper, but on my news feeds because I got several of them that this person has a viral TikTok video up and it's borderline pornography.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, my issue, I guess, I use TikTok. I enjoy it, but it for me it can be very habit forming because again, we were talking earlier about like algorithms. So once you start liking the videos, it knows what you like, and so then it only sends you like stuff that you like, and then you
Mhm.
can sit on it for hours because you're getting all these like videos of creators and content that so for me my algorithm is like I'm a teacher, right? So I'll get lots of teachers talking about what they're doing in their classrooms and I get ideas from that, so in that way it's a good thing.
Right.
I'm also a Taylor Swift fan, so like I get a lot of her content on there, but then I like it so much I could just sit there for hours and watch all these videos, and then
Oh,
it's very
Taylor
habit
Swift.
forming.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not a. Yeah, she was. I think she came to Denver when the Broncos played the playoffs. I think. I'm not a.
Mm.
I'm not a. I talk about anything on my podcast, especially history, except sports. I won't talk about sports. I'm not a sports fan at all.
Yeah, I'm not really a sports fan either. But my point is just like so with new media, um, it can be very habit forming. So I think for students, and they know this, and their parents are because their parents are like my age, like they understand that you need to set a limit. So like having students or teens only have like an hour or two of screen time, and then actually taking and physically putting their phone somewhere else so the kid doesn't have access to it in the middle of the night, because I have some students that just stay up all night on their
Yeah.
devices. So I really would encourage parents to like let them have them for a couple hours and then say, okay, I'm taking your phone now and you can go to bed and I'll give you your phone back when you go to school or whatever, because they just need to have limits still because they're kids, and they will just I will sit there as an adult just looking at it forever. So
I when internet first came around, I'm old enough to remember the first computer I had was in 1980.
hmm.
So I've been around computers a long time, and
Hmm.
I'd sit for hours and days just going through stuff on the internet when it first came out, and it was pretty well limited in the beginning. But now there's no limit.
Right. And I mean, I do find with like parenting is so different. I'm not a parent, but I deal with parents, obviously since I deal with
Yeah,
kids. And I'm amazed at like how early that they're given iPads and things. And I get it. Like again, I'm a child of the 80s. We had the TV going on in the background. There were days where I'm sure my mom just like put on the cartoons and like let us sit there and got her moment. So I get that's kind of what parents are using iPads and things now for. It's like just take iPad for like an hour, and but it's not, it shouldn't be used as a tool just to pacify a child. I feel like a child just still should have time. Like we were also told go outside and like run
yeah.
off your energy and like go outside and play, come back when it's dark. And
It
that's
was
not
when
the same
the
anymore.
street lights came in. Actually, I didn't even go home when the street lights came on.
Yeah.
My
Different time
hometown,
now.
but I'd come home in time to eat dinner.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's okay because
Hmm.
well, first of all, it was a very small town I was growing up in. It's not like the big cities where it's relatively dangerous to be out.
Right. Yeah, it depends on the neighborhoods that you were in. I grew up in a suburb, so it was pretty safe. Like we all knew our neighbors and everything was within a bike. I could ride my bike everywhere, and
Yeah.
yeah, people would look out for us.
Right, that's good news.
Hmm.
What's your favorite book in the Bible?
Favorite book in the Bible? That's a great question. I really love the book of Hebrews.
Okay,
Um, and I'm a big Paul fan, so I do love his letters. And for Hebrews is kind of debated whether it's Like in my field, like I've heard scholars say, oh, it's absolutely Paul's letter. And then I've heard some people say that the author of Hebrews might be different than
Mhm.
other letters. So, but I love the writing in it. I love the themes in it. But yeah, I'm a big Paul letter
Yeah, so am
fan,
I. The
Pauline
one I
letters.
like best is
Hmm.
First Corinthians.
Okay, First Corinthians is great. Yep,
It's a
classics. Got some
great book.
classic
I really
passages in
like
there.
it.
12 chapters, 12 and 13 are my favorite from First
Yeah,
Corinthians. Hmm. But for Hebrews, I love chapter 4. I love chapter 11. I love chapter
yeah,
12. There's just like a lot of passages I love.
yeah. That's the way I haven't read Hebrews in quite a while, but I actually I hadn't even had time to read First Corinthians for a while. But I do. I get daily on my phone actually because I'm so that I get daily readings from
Mm.
the
So I
Bible.
actually have a scripture podcast. The reason I'm on Podmatch is that I have a scripture podcast where I have my guests pick a verse that they want
Oh,
to chat
okay.
about, and then we chat. So I just did an episode with a guest about Hebrews 11, and I just love it because it's the author, whoever it is, has this kind of repetition and goes through salvation history. It's like kind of gives a summary of like by faith Abraham did this, by faith David did this, and just kind of goes into up to Christ. And I just love the kind of summative, like I love that it's concise, but written kind of with repetition. It's kind of poetic in a way too.
You know, my congregation, the church I belong to, we do a weekly healing service on Wednesdays. Do
Hmm.
it because we have priests too.
Hmm.
Yeah, female
Hmm.
priests. Our
I
priests.
know, I know, I know.
But anyway, Mother Becky would do on the saints out of the liturgy
Hmm.
for her sermon on Wednesdays. So it's only about 10 minutes long, but it's really getting some interesting things about some of the lesser known saints out there.
Hmm.
A
And
lot
that's
of
just something I
times,
love about being Catholic is all the communion of saints. And one of my that tie it back to Hebrews, one of my favorite passages is Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. And it talks about that we have this great cloud of witnesses, which I believe are like the communion of saints, that we have these witnesses that watch us and went before us.
yeah,
And I love that tradition of the Catholic Church and the Episcopal Church, and some
yeah.
of the Protestant traditions too, that we have recognized the saints to help us, give us, like looking at St. Paul and like, okay, if he could endure all of that and all the division that he endured, like, you know,
Oh,
you
being
know,
disabled too and having problems
and
that he had.
imprisoned and yep.
You can't plan to be healed, and God said no.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
power of prayer is so incredible.
Hmm. Yeah, truly. It does bring me peace. Like I said earlier, like when things feel hopeless, we can always go to prayer to calm us down and give us hope.
Things get real bad, I call my priest.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's
Absolutely.
acceptable. And I think it's so. Do you think the Catholic Church will ever go to female priests?
So
Or
right now, I know that the Pope has been looking at the diaconate. So like for us in our church, the first step before you become a priest is to be a deacon. And
yeah,
there are some deacons that are married, and so they're opening up, they're studying and looking to see if women. I personally, this is my personal opinion, think that there is historical evidence for women to be deacons, because deacons in my church baptize and preach, or yes, deacons in my church baptize and preach, and I feel like there is scriptural evidence that there were women who
yeah.
baptized and preached the good news. I think for me, the story of the resurrection, Mary Magdalene was one of the first ones to go tell of the resurrected Christ. So I feel like that's kind of evidence that women can preach the good news.
We've got a
Um,
long history of women in the church.
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. So to your point, your question, I don't know if there'll be women priests because for us, the apostles, were men, but I do think there were a lot of female disciples. So I think the first step would to be um, deacons. And I feel like there is a case for that.
Fact is, I know of two couples in California where I was at for a few years that are married. Both of them are deacons in the Episcopal Church.
Wow. That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's
I'm praying. And one day, personally, again, my personal opinion, I would love to see a like female diaconate, and I would be interested in it myself too.
our bishop here in Colorado, the Episcopal Diocese in Colorado, is a woman. She's an African
Hmm.
American woman to boot. She's
Hmm.
just,
That's awesome.
in fact,
That's
Bishop Lucas is just an incredible lady. But we are. The Episcopal Church is a very liberal church and always has been since the very beginning, back in the
Mhm.
Revolutionary War days when we got started. Been very liberal. So that's the reason we have gays as bishops. And so we're very open and very liberal
Mhm.
about
I
that.
do, I appreciate that. I also something I like about the Catholic Church though is that we do kind of run the spectrum. Like it's a challenge for us because there are people with so many different perspectives. But I think that also is it's good news that people of different backgrounds can be in the same pews together,
Mhm.
and it doesn't matter necessarily what their politics are when you're in the
No,
pews at a Catholic church, or hopefully it shouldn't matter. I think sometimes people bring their own perspectives and whatever, but I think the way it's established is to give it kind of a
well,
universal global
I
thing.
notice a liberalism in Mother Becky's sermon sometimes too.
Mm.
Liberalism
Hmm.
sneaks into a sermon once in a while. But
Hmm.
which is okay. She's an excellent preacher. She's wonderful.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people talk about reading the Bible from cover to cover every year. And I know one
Mm.
gentleman, unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he would read from Genesis to Revelations every year. And that's how he started,
Wow.
from Genesis to Revelation. Is that a way to read the Bible,
Yeah.
or should you read it differently?
I wouldn't encourage that personally. I mean, go for it. I would say if someone has already studied scripture previously, then maybe. But if you're someone new just diving in, I think that would be a lot. I usually recommend to start with maybe the Psalms, because those are very prayers that have like are connected to emotions that I feel like we can relate to.
Mhm.
And they're, kind of small chunks. And it does give you a history of like the Old Testament. There's Psalms that were written during like the time period of the Babylonian exile, which was a very important time for the Jewish people. I feel like you can get some of the themes of the Old Testament if you read the Psalms. And
Mhm.
for the Gospels, I would start with just like Mark, very simple, straightforward, shortest, probably the first one written.
Yep.
So I would start with like Psalms or Mark personally to give you some Old Testament, New Testament,
Yeah, okay, I just
knowledge.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
You read it like a book, and I've heard other scholars. N.T. Wright. You ever heard of him? N.T.
What is the name again?
N.T. Wright,
Mm-mm, no.
the a New Testament scholar in England. He was a Archbishop of Canterbury for a while. He's retired,
Mm,
obviously, and he's written some incredibly wonderful scholarship books about the New Testament. That's his main. So, and he recommended you start wherever you start,
mm,
jump around, but read the whole Bible in a year, but do it not like a book. I
mm-hmm.
agree
Yeah,
with
I
you.
can see that.
I don't think it's a good
Mm-hmm.
idea. I
Yeah, and I
don't.
think if you do start with some more of the obscure books, like maybe looking at the footnotes or the introduction to the book, most Bibles have like a page or two that gives you an introduction to the book to kind of give you some context. I just find more and more, I think, knowing the context or a little bit of the background, before you dive into the book itself is helpful for people,
Okay. I
or like commentaries and stuff that are out there.
I have an Oxford dictionary with Concordia and the whole bit. It's about that thick,
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
50 pounds.
And I find those helpful, but those could also be intimidating for people. And I get that. There's a lot of resources online now. So if you have a Bible passage that you want like a commentary on, you really can just Google like commentary on
You bet.
that passage.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's a wonderful service as long as they're true to the.
And laws, and it's credible. And then you get into the whole
Yeah,
website thing again. Yeah.
yeah, because some people will pervert not only the Bible, the holy words, but the words of others, like the Prophet Muhammad.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
would they have perverted his words so badly. I mean, I've read the Quran, and it
Mm.
is actually two books in one. It's like ours, except the first half of theirs is love and peace and all that. The second half is a lot of violence and hatred and anger in it. I don't know
Mm.
what the difference between the two are exactly. It is just kind of subtle as it makes the change. It's not real blatant. This is love, this is hate. But that's the way the
Mm.
Quran is written. And they've taken
Mm.
that word that's got all that hate stuff in it and perverted that. Because even underlying all that stuff that he's talking about, anti-Semitism and stuff, is a sense that he's love, and the love is there, but not as
Mm.
prevalent.
Hmm.
In my opinion, that's the way
Yeah, I
I.
think I think literal interpretations of stuff in general can be dangerous
Oh,
sometimes. Now, as a Catholic, we take lots of things literally in the New Testament, but Like Genesis isn't a book that I necessarily take literally, but some Christians do. And I
Yeah.
think it's just, yeah, we have our
I
different
don't,
interpretations.
that's one thing about being Episcopalian. I can believe in dinosaurs.
Yes. Yes. Well, I just think I mean, having studied it, I mean, we know that like the Jewish people were very symbolic people, like figurative language, and all the
Mhm.
numbers had a symbolic meaning. That math, it was it the same way that we do math and number today. My students, when we read some of the Old Testament passages, they're like, "Oh my gosh, was so and so really like 300 years old?" And I'm like, "No, the numbers mean something though." And for me, that makes it even more beautiful. You
Yeah.
know that there are these symbolic messages in addition to the stories. But yeah.
Well, that's prevalent throughout the Bible, where you've got that
Hmm.
symbolism in there. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I love the Bible. I really like it. Have you ever heard of a group called the EFM, Education for
Mm-mm.
Ministries?
Mm-mm.
It's actually started in Spain right after the Spanish Civil War, and it's Education for Ministries. It's not for ministries, but for ministries. And I took that course. It's a 4-year course. Sawney Seminary in Tennessee. And the first year we read the Old Testament, and then we discuss each book each week in our
Mm-hmm.
classes. The second year we do the New Testament, same thing. Read each book of the New Testament and then discuss it and see what did we get out of this passage or that passage or maybe the whole book itself and discuss it. Third year, not third week. Third year is theology, church history, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the church history is just incredible. I love that year. It's one of my favorite years. The fourth year is theology. So
Mm.
I took that whole course, so I've had some theology and church history and all that.
That's
But
great.
it's an interesting thing, and any denomination can be in it. And we're
Mm-hmm.
not limited to the Episcopals because it started as
Mm-hmm.
a Catholic. A couple of
Mm-hmm.
Spanish monks started it after the Civil War in Spain because of the damage the war done to people. Because,
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now. In a program right now to become a spiritual director.
okay,
And the book is called Thirsty for God, and it's by Bradley Holt. And I believe he might be Episcopal or Protestant, but he essentially it's like it's literally like a history. It kind of goes back to like the time of Christ and give some of the Jewish tradition and then really all of the movements through the
yeah,
2000 years.
yeah,
It's not, but it's very tangible. It's not an intimidating book. I feel like a book like that sounds very, but it's not maybe like 300 pages. It's a paperback, but it just kind of gives blurbs of these different movements that we've had throughout Christianity, and I don't know.
oh,
I find it helpful.
yeah. It is a good. I have not heard of that book or that
Mhm.
particular author, but it sounds pretty darn interesting. I've read a lot of N.T. Wright and several Bonhoeffer. Read a lot of him. We did a lot of him in that too. And we had one guy in our group that just loved Bonhoeffer, so we talked a lot about him.
Yeah, Bonhoeffer's great. Yeah.
He was
Hmm.
absolutely fabulous. Uh,
Hmm.
quite a Christian, quite a Christian. He was a Catholic. Going back into Germany, actually escaped just to help the
Hmm.
people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we have a rich, I mean, I have, the church is not perfect. I have my moments with the church, but we have a rich history. And I do feel like there's a lot of like good and truth in there, personally.
there
So,
is. It really is. We've already talked about your favorite Bible passages.
hmm.
Hebrews 11, I know I remember, and 12, I believe was another one I remember.
Hmm.
Before
Hmm.
I forget it, it's come to my mind several times, and before I forget it, is there a particular website you want people that I can put on there for editing?
Sure. So if you search for 7 Mile Chats, and I can
Seven.
send you the link, but if you search for 7 Mile Chats in Google or in Apple Podcasts or Spotify podcasts, where you get your podcast, 7 Mile Chats is the name of my podcast. And it's based off of the passage from Luke's Gospel, the road to Emmaus, where two people are
Yeah.
walking from um,
Mhm.
Jerusalem 7 miles towards Emmaus. And on their journey, they meet Jesus and they have this conversation. So my podcast, as I mentioned earlier, is about me walking kind of figuratively with a guest as we talk about a passage.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look that
So
up.
that
I'll look
yeah,
it
so yeah,
up.
7 Mile Chats is my podcast. People can search for it, and the Google, if you search for 7 Mile Chats all spelled out, it should send you
I'm
right to
sure
it.
it'll come out. it'll come up somewhere, because like me, I'm all over the place. I don't even know how many places I'm at anymore. So,
Yeah, if you Google my name too, Julia Strukely, everything, all my podcast stuff pops up.
and I do a second podcast too on trauma.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah.
That,
I started my podcast in the pandemic as a way to connect with people. And since I was a teacher, it was something I could still create and educate with. But I keep doing it because I have cool conversations with people I don't even know. And I've never had a bad episode. I feel like every
no,
conversation like has something to offer. So I would,
I had one bad episode, and that was I was a guest
mm,
on the show, and they were gotcha. They were trying to get me.
oh, okay.
Gotcha
Yeah.
questions. I actually had a little trouble answering because they were gotcha questions.
Mm.
I'm going to put that at the 7milechats.com. Okay,
It's
because
not .com, but if you just search for seven, I can send you it's not really a website, it's like an RSS feed. So
okay, yeah,
um
because what I do is I can put it in when
in the
I
links in
edit,
the
I
show
can put
notes,
it
yeah.
into the show.
Yeah, you can find it on Facebook, Instagram
Okay,
too.
I'll look
So
it up. You can send it to me
yeah,
if you would and make it easier.
I will. Yes, I
That's
will.
much. Right now, I'm t- almost traumatically behind in my research. I had to stop and look you up again. I'm going, wait a minute, Julia, what is she? I
Hmm.
had to look you up, but before this afternoon. What lessons have you learned on your faith journey?
Oh, that is a big big I must have put that, huh?
Yeah.
It what lessons have I learned? I have learned that self-awareness and discernment are really key. I discerned religious life because I'd been Catholic my whole life, and I thought maybe religious life, being a nun, might be for me. And even though that was not the case, that was not my vocation, I found that process of like getting to know myself and the gifts that God had given me. So discernment, I mean like asking God, what is my purpose? Looking at your gifts, finding out what you're good at, like that whole process was really, really helpful for me in my faith journey. So I would encourage anybody. Since I am Catholic, Saint Ignatius's spiritual exercises and like
Mhm.
his ways of prayer and ways of life, any kind of Ignatian thing I really find helpful in my faith journey because he asked a lot of questions about like when you're in desolation or consolation, like things that to do and not to do when you're feeling good, when you're feeling bad, like how to listen to yourself. So like discernment, self-awareness, like listening to yourself and listening to God, with the help of St. Ignatius has been really helpful for me.
This is not on your form, but have you heard the voice? Tell you a quick story. When I became an Episcopalian, I walked into the narthex and made a right turn to go into the chapel. And when my left foot was halfway across from the wood floor of the narthex to the carpet of the chapel, I felt something that I called at that time uh, warm fuzzies at the 10th power.
Mm,
I
mm-hmm,
have since
mm-hmm.
learned it was the Holy Spirit. Have you felt anything similar to that?
Yeah, I've had the privilege to travel a lot as a teacher, like in the summers. And
Mm-hmm.
I went to the Holy Land. I got to go
Awesome.
before all of this, like in 2019. And
Yeah.
there were many sites that we went to where I definitely had those like warm fuzzies and convinced that the Holy Spirit was there. And I have it with my students sometimes when I'm in ministry. Like you don't have to go to the Holy Land to have those moments, like you said,
No.
but certainly in the Holy Land for sure. And then also
Yeah.
just in my ministry.
Now,
Mhm.
I've heard some deacons and other members of my church, not here in Colorado yet, but in California, the Episcopal Church, who said the same thing. They could
Yeah.
feel the Holy in certain locations.
Yep. And you will never look at the Bible the same because now when I read about Capernaum, I know what Capernaum looks like. Or when I read about Mount Calvary, like I know, like I've been to the Holy Sepulchre, the
Yeah,
tomb, I just see picture, it just really enhaces your experience of
yeah, I'd like
scripture.
to get there myself. I'm going to wait until things settle down a
Yeah,
little
we gotta
bit.
pray. We gotta pray for that place because it's so
Um,
interesting. Bethlehem is so close to Jerusalem, obviously. And I don't know if people realize that like Bethlehem is in Palestine, but Jerusalem is in Israel, and they're
yeah,
so close together.
yeah,
Um, it's ridiculous. Like you could walk, it's 5 miles. But it's so contentious. So
yeah, it
we
really
gotta
is.
pray. Yeah, we gotta pray.
I do every day for not just them, but the Ukraine as well.
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
other places that are full of strife and because I've had talks with very many spiritual people and religious people who say that we're in the end days now. Do you believe that?
I don't feel that, but that doesn't mean we don't need to pray and be. I feel like when Jesus said to like be aware, the hour can come at any point. I don't know when that hour is going to be. I don't feel like it's right now, but I'm still going to be prepared and ready and live according to his gospel, so that I can be ready.
We've had this discussion in EFM one night. In fact, we had it several nights. The gentleman in the jungle in the Amazon has never heard the word, doesn't know anything about Jesus, never read the Bible, doesn't have not heard the word. Yet he lives a moral and pious life according to his values and principles of his tribe. Is he going to heaven?
I personally believe that he would, because I think I personally believe when we die that Jesus comes to meet us. And I think about the moment on the cross with the two criminals, like
Mhm.
those two men, they met Jesus on their deathbed, and
Right,
one looked at him and said, like, I just knew that he was a holy person, right? Like
right.
he wasn't a follower, but he like was met Jesus on his deathbed and was like, and Jesus said to him, "You'll be with me in paradise." The other guy on his deathbed looks at him and says, "I don't believe you're the son of God." So he's probably not in paradise. But that's
Probably
that's
not.
my kind of story that I tell my students. I personally think that we meet Jesus when we die and we still have a choice even on our deathbed. So that's my
Okay, because I believe the same thing. That the
yeah.
guy that lives a moral life according to the values and principles of his tribe will go.
Yeah. Like if he does meet Jesus, which I believe he will meet Jesus when he dies, and because he lived a good life and he will probably recognize Christ in that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I always hope for that. That I get to meet Jesus one of these days. That's something
I mean, I've
that's.
been working for him for a long time, so I hope that we get to hang out.
Well,
I
I haven't
hope that
been
we
here
get to
that
hang out.
long. I think 2012, but I'm not sure exact date of when I became an Episcopalian. But I had a long history of other problems. Anyway, we're going to have to be getting close to ending this, Julia. I want to thank you again for being here. You've had an incredible story. I'm going to turn off the recording and then we'll finish up with just a brief couple of statements I want to make, because I don't want to take up any more broadcast time than I have to on that. You've got a wonderful story. You're a wonderful person. God bless you,
Thank you.
and have a marvel. Teach your kids right from wrong.
Trying. We're trying. I have hope. I have hope. So yeah.
Yeah, sixth graders. I don't know, 12-year-olds.
I have hope. They show me hope every day. So for those who maybe might be discouraged with the state, I do feel like there is still hope. Like I've got some good students I'm working with right now.
Well, I was a drug and alcohol counselor for 24 years, and I never gave up hope on my clients.
Yeah, you can't.
Some of
Yeah.
them were really far down the line. And
Hmm.
I'm an alcoholic myself. I've got 34 years of recovery, so I know it can be done.
Hmm.
And so I never give up hope either.
Hmm. Yeah. I believe we can't give up hope.
All right, I'm gonna shut off
Thank
the
you for
recording.
listening to the show. There are show notes and a place to comment at https:// coffee time again .lipson.com/website. He hopes that you liked what you heard and will tell others about him. Dale is attempting to get a following that both disagrees and agrees with him. He does not want yes men. If you disagree, wonderful. He is happy to have you here as a part of the Coffee Time Again team. Dale does not talk about the news of the day. He is attempting to give a history lesson that is just as important about what is going on in the headlines of today. Please do not hesitate to contact him. Just remember that Dale wants a clean show, meaning no cussing, name calling, yelling, or hate allowed. You can disagree with him and not be disagreeable about it. Support him and help keep this alive. https colon // glow.fm / coffee time again.